Elemental, Alex here. Just coming at you with another strength set here. Today we're going to be looking at push and hinge strength specifically. So we'd want you to ideally warm up before you get into this superset here, because we're going to be treating it as a pure strength time to work. So specifically what I want you to be focusing on is your push-up. And for 8 repetitions, that's a little bit on the higher end for strength sets, but we're just going to roll with it here. And so then we're going to follow that up. We're going to put some mobility in between the few strength exercises that you're doing. And I want you to do that because I want you to rest and actually do some mobility while you're hanging out at your house. And this will kind of give you an idea when you're doing these mobility exercises of some things you can do on your rest days, right? Because when we are coming to the gym frequently, we have times in between our visits to the gym, where we can focus on mobility, some restorative exercises. But if we're just hanging out at our house, there's all this time to kill, right? And so we don't want to fill that completely with strength and conditioning exercises the whole time. We also want to have a good idea of what to do for mobility and restorative exercises, and we'll get some of those put together for you as well here in the future. And so push up for 8, and again remembering, like, progress and regress that as much or as little as needed. If we can do 8 push-ups on the ground, no problem, then let's try to bring that to an elevation and start working into single arm push-ups. Or you can do offset push-ups, right? Like using a milk crate, and we'll get to that in just a second. So we'll go push-ups, shoulder dislocates for 60 seconds. Lots of times in the gym we're using a PVC pipe or like a yoga strap or something, but I have my sweater here and a piece of clothing, or if you're a rock climber, like part of your rope will work just as well to get some full range overhead mobility through your shoulders. So after you do that for about 60 seconds, and be real lenient with it, right? Like, it doesn't have to be 60 seconds. It could be 2 minutes, it could be 3 minutes. It's really up to you. We'll follow that up with the single leg deadlift. And the single leg deadlift is really great because it requires, to do correctly, it requires a lot of tension and focus on the movement pattern itself. And you're trying to focus on not really twisting in your torso, keeping your hips nice and square. And so we'll get to that in just a second. But ideally we're doing 5 repetitions on each side. Followed up by iron curtsy, which is a great hamstring lower body mobility exercise. Holding that for 30 to 60 seconds on each side. Everybody has like a different time frame that's going to get them deeper into a stretch and get a better effect out of that mobility exercise or the stretch exercise. And so again, just reminding yourself you don't have to be fixed to this time frame. And then we'll finish up the superset with a core exercise, hollow hold, and we can progress and regress that as needed. So, for example, 8 push-ups, right? Like, let's say I can do 8 push-ups on the ground, no problem. Then I'm going to work on trying to change the input from one arm to the other. So I might do an elevated push-up on one side with the other hand kind of working to get myself off the ground, and I would just split that set in half, right? So I do 4 on one side and 4 on the other, and so it might look something like this, right? It might be here, hands are about shoulder width apart, feet are a little bit wider, because when we come up and we take one hand off the ground, we want to have a good base of stabilization, right? So we'd come down, push up, and then this hand comes off the ground, and then lower back down, right? So 4 here, and then switch sides and do it on your left side, right? Like we've talked about before, if we need to elevate that push-up, take it off the ground, we can use a chair, you can use your kitchen table, we can even use your kitchen countertop, right? And if you're going to like single arm progressions, we can start up at that countertop to try to make full range of motion efforts, okay? And then we're gonna go into shoulder dislocates. And so I'm just gonna use my sweater, and remember, we wanna get full range of motion, front to back, mobility, trying not to, as we pull back here, we're trying not to like hyperextend in our back, so just staying nice and stable that way. So we'd hold that for, move through that for 60 to 90 seconds or so. And then we're going to our single leg deadlifts. And this is really like a great progression of unilateral strength, so single-sided strength, but it also builds up lower body strength to be able to do pistol squats. And so if you remember single leg deadlifts or single leg Romanian deadlifts, we want to be able to remain stable on the working side while also keeping tension in the airborne leg, right? And so lots of times what happens when people start to move through the range of motion for these deadlifts, our hips start to open up and open our, externally rotating our hips, right? And so we want to be able to keep tension in our leg by pulling our toes back to our knee and kind of like pressing into the air with our heels, so that when this leg comes behind us, we're less likely to be loose and open up in that hip. And so we're going to, hands are out in front of us, fists are clenched. We want to keep that tension in our upper body as well. Spine is neutral, working foot is planted on the ground, airborne leg is nice and tight, keep that tension. And then we want to initiate by driving our foot back, keeping our back nice and flat. We don't need to, it's not about the height of this foot, it's more about getting that full range of motion here and then back up to the top nice and tight. And so if you need to put your foot down and rest in between each repetition, that's great. If you can keep that leg up off the ground, that's best, right? And so we're gonna go 5 repetitions here. Deep breath in, nice and tight. Hold that tension, right back up to the top. So we'd hold that for 5 reps on one side, repeat on the other for 5. And then we're gonna go into our lower body mobility, iron curtsy. And this is great. This is one of my favorite mobility and stretching exercises. And so I want you to set up one leg, adjust it out to the side, right? And this is gonna be the working leg. This back leg, opposite of what might be like a windmill, right? This back leg is, you're gonna hinge in your hips and bend this knee. And we just wanna try to bring our chest towards our toe, right? And we're not rounding in our spine. The goal is not to get your head as close to your foot as you can. The goal is to keep pressing your hips back and trying to get your chest as close to your toe as you can. And what's really important is to remember that in these mobility exercises and stretch exercises that we need to be able to breathe. If we're moving into a position where we have to hold our breath, then it's not as effective, right? And so we need to back off a little bit on the intensity or modify, okay? But if you're not feeling too much here, we can go ahead and reach for the ground, pull our toes back to our hip, and you should be feeling this stretch all the way from the back of your calf up through your hamstring and maybe even into your glute, right? And so we just hold this for about 30 seconds on each side. Go ahead and switch. And then we'd finish up this strength set with a hollow hold for about 20 seconds. And let's start that hollow hold at a dead bug, right? If dead bug is challenging for you for 20 seconds, remain here. If 20 seconds in this position is not so bad, then we can start to add some destabilizing into it, right? We can bring our hands overhead, we can drop one leg, but if we're looking for that hollow hold, We want to start in this dead bug and then lower into that hollow hold and hold that for 20 seconds. Okay? At the end of the set, give yourself a couple of minutes, go grab a drink of water, take a breather. Like I said before, go answer some emails if you're still working. The great thing about all this stuff is that you can kind of intertwine it with other things that you're doing at the house. And so, you know, you can get it in and get the rest in that you need, because we do want to treat this as a pure strength set. So I hope you have fun with that.